You know how it is, right? Sharing products, specifications, USPs, compliance. These things don't just fall from the sky when you're manufacturing in China. And the factory isn't really helpful with that because at the end of the day, you have to take responsibility. Thank God there's AI, which actively supports us with this. And what used to take you months, now we can do it here in maybe 10 to 15 minutes. By the way, this is part two of our e-commerce AI series. I've linked the first part where we take a close look at the market up here, or you can also find it in the video description. Today, it's all about how you can use AI to help you. In this case, we're using Exxon Alibaba.com to develop a product in such a way that you know exactly what specifications the item has, the dimensions, the visualization, which USPs you can incorporate, and at the end of the day, what compliance you need. And all of this, not in months, but in under 15 minutes. We'll pick up right where I left off in part one, in the outdoor category. As I already mentioned, I have no experience at all in this category. And that's what makes it so exciting because I have to rely 100% on the AI. In this case, the AI is Axio. And I already wrote a pretty rough prompt saying that I want to develop a product for solo hikers who don't want to miss out on gourmet food while they're on the go. I would really like the market to be analyzed for competitors, for example, Jetboil or MSR. And I would also like to know the difference compared to the EU market, because my idea is to take established products from the USA that basically don't exist in Europe yet, make sure I don't infringe on any patents, and then develop exactly such a product. The advantage of this is that since it is already established in the USA, I know there is a market for it. And if there is a market, then there is also a manufacturer. And I don't have to reinvent the wheel. You know what I mean? Exio has now produced a very detailed analysis within just a few minutes, something that would probably have taken weeks or months to do manually. It started with some statistical data showing that the market for solo hikers is at 153% among those who prefer gourmet food, and it has already presented me with 3 detailed product suggestions. And that's very exciting. All I really told it was what I needed. Products that are popular in the outdoor sector and that bridge the gap between Europe and the USA. And now there are 3 suggestions. The whole thing has been very nicely worked out here. In this document, yes, Solo Hiker Gourmet Report. And with one click here on details, I get the corresponding analysis. The whole thing, of course, is enriched with the relevant links because Axio works less with imagination and more with reliable sources. And in 99% of cases, he really does cite trustworthy sources, which he references and bases his data on. Here we have Zircana, LinkedIn, Clever Hike, so all specialist blogs where you can get a pretty good overview of the current market. An interesting example here is Table for One, since 15% of all people who dine out in Europe do so alone. I hadn't even noticed that before. Interesting to know. But first, let's take a look at the pain points of typical customers. First, weight versus quality. Fresh ingredients are heavy, and especially frozen meals are extremely complicated to take along when traveling. Then there are the typical preparation problems. Gourmet cooking outdoors requires precise heat control, especially when simmering. Most ultralight cooking systems simply don't offer this function. Yeah, ready-made meals, we don't even need to talk about those. They're usually just a bland mush. And the next problem is the effort required for cleaning. When you're on the go, it's just difficult to properly clean your dishes. Next, Exio took a closer look at the competition. Jetboil, they have relatively good systems, but they're also heavy. Only somewhat suitable for hiking, really. MSR has good and reliable devices, but in general, they're considered oversized. And Sodo has an ultralight product. However, the gourmet features here are quite limited. That means every competitor has their own unique USP, but none can truly satisfy a solo gourmet hiker. Either the products are too big or they lack gourmet features and may not be easy to clean. Okay, but Exio goes one step further. He not only analyzes the market, he also gives us recommendations on which products we should consider. For example, here we have a set consisting of a spice grinder, a whisk, and a bottle with flavoring. Possibly what I can take with me when traveling with the corresponding key specifications. For example, when it comes to materials, we use brushed titanium, food grade real silicone, and glass. And the individual components are, for example, here, a 4-chamber spice grinder, a micro whisk, a 10 milliliter oil dispenser, and a pouch. The whole thing is supposed to weigh under 45 grams, because every extra gram is, of course, really annoying when hiking. And there is already a small calculation. That means BOM, bill of material, basically the production cost. It's between $8 and $12, and the sales price should be between $35 and $45. That makes sense. The next suggestion from Exio is the Alpine Chef set. This is an integrated solo cooking system with a wide base for real searing and precision simmering. The advantage is that the pan is relatively wide, meaning it has a large diameter, which makes cooking easier. And down here we also have the illustration for it. Here the specs are listed again, and once again there's a small calculation. The production costs are $60, and the sales price should be somewhere around $190. Lastly, we have a thermal sleeve. I'm not entirely sure how that's supposed to work. In any case, it's supposed to work with residual heat. I'm not completely convinced by the specifications. From my point of view, since it's a product that involves a lot of innovation, I believe that the customer base is also significantly more limited than with the first two products. And then here we have a direct comparison again. Let's go back to my screen of all three products that Exio suggested to us. So first, the positioning. This is an entry-level product here, which is this set consisting of a spice grinder, whisk, and dosing bottle. Then here we have this cooking set, this cooking station. This is premium, clearly, and much more complicated. And then there's this residual heat bag. It's very innovative and a very small niche, as I mentioned earlier. And here we also have a brief assessment of how quickly you can get the product to market. Product 1, 12 weeks. Product 2, 24 to 30 weeks. There's a lot of development involved in that. And then the residual heat bag takes between 16 and 20 weeks. The strategic role is briefly defined here again. Product 1 is, of course, clearly a mass market product. It's basically the moneymaker, does little for branding but brings in a lot of money. If that's what you want, go for it. Then we have product number 2, the cooking station. That's the brand hero, the flagship. That means you can really use it to push your brand forward. Yes, and then there's this residual heat container, which is an innovative product. As I said, personally, I'm not a huge fan of it. In the end, Exio suggests what we can pay for next. There are only 3 options. Of course, we can do whatever we want, but these are suggestions for what the next typical steps would be. Either sourcing, matching, deep dive analysis, or inquiry generation. Now, I want to take a closer look at product number 2 because, as I said, in this video series, we want to build a brand. We don't need a mass market product or something that's totally fancy and innovative, but rather something where we can offer a premium product to the market where our name really stands for something. All right, so that means I simply give Exio the information that the next step is. So I now want to have the analysis of this product number 2 specifically. And again, within just a few minutes, we have a very good analysis from Exio with some interesting background information, especially for people who aren't very familiar with the product, like myself, for example. We have a ratio of diameter to height of 4:1. This is supposed to improve the cooking surface by 40%, and as a result, the dish should turn out better at the end of the day. Then here we have the foldable handle again, which is very interesting, and all of this in an ultra-lightweight system. Again, it's set up here with a file that I can access. And there you'll find all the information about this product. What's interesting, what's important, what do I need to know? Also things like the locking mechanism for the handle so that the handle doesn't come loose on its own, and I have a stable way to work with the pan. Exio has also listed 3 types of handles here. There's the butterfly handle, the detachable one, and at the end of the day, the folding handle with a lock with the estimated weight and the expected stability. And here the folding handle is clearly the one. The version with a lock is the preferred option. But the pan is not the only thing that needs to be produced here, of course. If I open this up again, we have a small graphic showing the stove, which is also part of it, the handle, and the pan, including the lid. This then resulted in the corresponding specification, which material, which coating, and so on. Now we know exactly what the product looks like and which specifications we want, but I want it to be a bit more detailed. So how exactly is the specification? Prepared in such a way that ideally you could send it directly to an Asian manufacturer. For that, I have once again written this prompt here. Specifically, I want to have a detailed design including technical specifications so that I can send it directly to a manufacturer and they can provide me with a detailed quote. Additionally, I have uploaded the image here again so that Exio knows exactly what kind of product it actually is. The more information, the better at the end of the day. So here we have the corresponding result with the illustrations. This is very exciting. Exeo has started to optimize the product, meaning it is developing even more features, which I actually didn't ask for at all, but I could probably prevent that with an additional prompt. But of course, this also leads to additional ideas. For example, here is a plug-in system where I can stack several pots inside each other. And here again, a small kettle if needed. The whole thing then down here with a fire pit. Then I'll go into the details again here. This is basically exactly what I can use to send a request to a manufacturer, with all the information that is actually necessary for production, which aluminum, what kind of coating, the handle, what material should the body be made of, and here again, the corresponding dimensions with the different pots that he has now added here. Of course, what's particularly interesting here are the compliance aspects he mentioned, the compliance specifically for the European Union and for North America. In this case, it's the FDA and LFGB, so the one for Germany. So here it's about testing for food safety. FDA and LFGB. The whole thing is supposed to be PFAS free, of course, and BPA free naturally. We also need REACH. I'm not entirely sure about ROACH. We'll have to take a closer look at that in detail. That's also a good point, which I followed up on next, because actually we want to sell the product in Europe. It's an idea from the USA that we want to bring to Europe. And that's why we need to focus on European compliance. And for this as well, I wrote an appropriate prompt. We need a list of the required compliance standards for this product in order to be able to sell it in the European Union. We also received the result for this super quickly. Here again, there is a document with all the really detailed compliance requirements that must be met. GPSR is even listed here now. Then there's the whole thing for food contact, meaning for contact with food. We had that earlier, LFGB. What the FDA is in the USA, LFGB is for Europe. The German standard is leading in this area. But also things like this, and of course it must also be taken into account that the gas application, meaning the burner or the fire source, must be CE certified. That it also has to meet a few other regulations in order to be sold at all. Exio works out all of this directly in the system here. So what you can order from Product IP in terms of compliance requirements, you can have analyzed directly here via XCO. And the standards we've already talked about, REACH, which is the investigation for substances of concern, then GPSR and WEE, basically the electronic waste law if any electronics are built in. And then we also have labeling and packaging requirements here. So we know this with the glass and fork symbol, for example, or for instance, the country where the product was manufactured. This is not necessary for Germany, but it is for other European countries. That's why I can only recommend that you always include it as a rule. Made in China, or wherever your production is located. So now, with the help of AI, we've developed a product that we previously had no idea about. We know which material, what size, which handle, and which compliance requirements we have to meet. What is the USP? And all of that with Exio, the AI from Alibaba.com. And above all, the amazing thing is that Exio continuously improved the product during our analysis and research. Suddenly, one pot became several pots that can be stacked inside each other. That means Exio understands the needs of the customers and responds to them directly. In part 3 of this series, we will manufacture according to these specifications. Quickly, efficiently, and purposefully, without misunderstandings. If you're interested in that, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the video. And we'll see each other next time. Ciao.